Welcome everyone to the joint session here of the Common Council and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, September 26th. I'm going to turn it directly over to Madam Chair Angie Lee.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much to Council for joining us tonight, and welcome to our DEI committee members. We would like to start our meeting. I will call this meeting to order, and we will start with roll call. No.
You can't do that until you have a quorum, so I would just dispense with that and I would suggest you just go down to your discussions
Item
with the council.
number
Okay.
8. Yeah, number 8.
We're going right into it then.
We can go back. Once you get your quorum, you can go back.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, can we start with a land acknowledgement? Or not?
I don't see why not.
All right. We are gathered here on the lands that were originally home to the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations. We honor the Menominee and Ho-Chunk communities and are grateful for their stewardship of the land and waters. We acknowledge these ancestral grounds as sacred and remember the complex history of settler colonialism on these lands and the effects that persist today. We commit to a restorative and healing relationship of the original inhabitants and our community. Okay, thank you. So we will move on to agenda item number 8, which is to review the charter with Common Council and our committee. Okay. Maybe we'll start with a little bit of background information. I believe that in conversations amongst our committee, as well as communication between Aaron and council, we believe it was a great idea to bring our two groups together to come to a common language and understanding of our charter. And I know that as for our committee, this charter has brought some confusion and maybe perhaps miscommunication. And so I think this is a great opportunity for our two groups to clarify some of that confusion and really be on the same page moving forward, so that we have a clear understanding of what we are charged with, as well as provide feedback. Welcome, Aaron. Provide feedback in real time of some of our concerns, and with the goal and intent being that, this is maybe by the end of this meeting, but if not, that we can certainly start this conversation and have more clarity in our purpose and in our role moving forward. So with that, maybe it'd be a good idea to bring up the charter. So I have my copy of that.
last page of the packet has,
Oh, thank you, Michelle. So in your packets, you will find that okay. The last page of the packet outlines that charter that was created in 2020. So maybe I'll start with our DEI committee and ask, I think, do we want to go through like the duties one by one and kind of see what questions arise and have council clarify some of those items for us as we go through that?
I personally have no preference. Start at the top. Doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Well, I think as far as, and I don't want to speak for the group, but as far as point A of membership in terms, I don't think there are any concerns with that section. Am I correct in speaking for the group? Membership in terms? Okay. So moving on to responsibility, I would just say that under responsibility, this word of advisory body or advisory has come up as, I wouldn't say contentious, but I would say that it has come up as far as creating some confusion for our group as far as what role that advisory, what it looks like. And so maybe that might be a good starting point for council.
Well, I guess a little bit of context. So we have two types of boards and commissions here in Oshkosh. There are the statutorily required compulsory boards or commissions, such as Plan Commission, landmarks, police and fire. And then, are we at 22 or 23? I think we merged and we're at 22 total. And about, I would say roughly half of those are what we call advisory, in that they're not compulsory. And so the idea is that those advisory boards are kind of special interests that make comment or recommendations. And that's kind of where we started, and then went down into, in the ordinance, the specific duties. I don't know if that's any more clear, or what the point of confusion is on the advisory piece.
I think the confusion, and again, please chime in if I am mistaken, is that at times we have been presented with information that as a group we felt we should advise prior to a decision, and that wasn't always the case. And so it creates a little bit of tension when we see as ourselves or our collective group as advisors, but those issues that have come up to council that we believe have a direct impact on the groups that perhaps we're representing, sometimes it's the timeline of when those ideas or issues have come up. And other times it's just that we have felt that we've just been not part of the conversation at all.
And I will say, perhaps City Manager, you can kind of review a little bit. So one thing that happened after the creation of this body is there was a policy put in place on the flow, I would say, as to things that are either have a genesis in a board, or from a council member, or from a citizen. And City Manager and staff put together, I think you've all seen the master flow chart as to entry points of topics. And so that happened just last year. It's a newer policy, and I don't know, City Manager, if you'd like to describe that, or if other council members perhaps would like to weigh in on that.
Well, this was approved by the council. The council had directed
Yes.
us to do that, so it demonstrates the flow to have items considered, because what one person might view as appropriate, someone may not even consider it, not even disagree, just not even consider it. So part of the process was to get people to, if they think it's appropriate, they could certainly bring it up to their committee, schedule it for discussion, and then they can decide if they want to pursue it any further. And then we could certainly take a look at that, both as me as city manager, as well as council. So that was kind of the process that got developed. I think the challenge is always, is it within the realm of your committee? In the case of DEI, it's a fairly broad description, because it talks about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You could make many arguments that something would be appropriate. But it's a question of when you do it. Sometimes, I will admit, there are things that make their way through the process, and maybe staff didn't think that it was necessarily an issue. When it's brought to our attention, oh, yeah, maybe we should have done that. I can tell you that another committee is with a similar broad charge is Sustainability Advisory Board. That issue has happened with SAB as well, so this committee isn't, it's not unique to just this committee. But sometimes those issues come up. With SAB, they wanted to take a look at, for example, our Public Works building from 10 years ago, to make sure it was environmentally friendly. A good example of something that was appropriate for them to look at. We eventually got them to take a look at that. And I think the one most recently that this group was looking at was the DORA ordinance. And I don't think it was necessarily there was a disagreement on it. That was more of a timing issue. And I think the committee made a pretty valid case. And had we gone through that process, I certainly would have agreed that it was something that was appropriate for the committee to take up. There were other logistical issues there that prevented it, and some of it was quorum issues here, but I would say that something like that, based on the input I heard from the committee, was that it was appropriate and could be discussed with you. But it really comes down to, there's a little bit of flow to that, and recognizing and staff become aware of those things. So I think it's just about dialogue that we should have those discussions and identify things.
I think to alleviate some of the flow, or to create more flow, Michelle has been bringing the council agenda. That's something we just instituted last month, to our meetings, so that we can review and see what items are up for discussion, and what areas or issues that we want to insert ourselves. But I think moving forward, just having this discussion and knowing that that's been a concern of ours, hopefully that's more on your radar, as well as, now it's more on our radar. But any other suggestions on how to help some of that flow or create a better communication between our groups?
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
I was just going to ask, so one of the things that's a little awkward, and this is not just for DEI, but for a number of folks, is that, so this group meets the fourth Monday. We meet the second and fourth Tuesday, but the agenda, we don't receive the agenda until the Friday before that Tuesday. So there's a little bit of a timing issue too, and I'm not sure how you would get an opportunity, because we would have basically 2 meetings before you would meet.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure technically how that would work in the time flow.
And I think what Michelle has brought forward has been just the second meeting's agenda that we can comment on. But, as ours does, sometimes it changes, things are added last minute. But I think, again, as I mentioned, just having this conversation, being aware of that.
Yeah, and I guess I keep thinking about timing, because the way, right, these advisory committees, they're not legislative committees, so we don't work like the state works, where something has to go through a committee and get voted before it comes to us. That's just not the way, it works in our ordinances or anywhere in local government. So the way that traditionally we get feedback from committees is you take a vote on something, or you let us know, this is what you recommend. So I guess I'm just thinking logistically here, how do we get the timing right to make sure you're in a position to both know what's coming and have the opportunity to take a vote as a committee and send us a. I know on the council side, at least, I can't speak for the whole council, but for myself, some of the frustration is I hear after the fact that DEI is upset about this, and I say, well, was it voted on? No. And then I hear, well, if there wasn't a quorum, is that true? I don't know. Right? So there needs to be some type of mechanism to make sure that you get the information you need to advise us, and that we're actually getting that formal advice. And I don't, no blame, it's not happening.
Sure.
And I think here in the duties, we did spell out specifically that, the DEI would serve as a resource on items, and including proposed city ordinances. So it would be, I think, wouldn't we agree that if there was something that staff was getting ready to bring forward, or a council member to introduce on an ordinance, there was the potential for it to be something of concern for DEI, that it would be funneled, or at least given them a heads up so that they can weigh in on their agenda?
A lot of that is that anticipation, and that's that's a bit of an art as opposed to a science, but one of the things that I think might be helpful, I don't, and if you don't raise your hand, I am not offended, but how many of you read my weekly newsletter? And it's okay if you don't raise your hand, I won't, if the council members don't raise their hand, I'll be upset. But the committee is certainly, so you kind of sometimes, well, maybe what we can do is add you to the subscription list for the newsletter, because what I try to do there is give a little kind of
Preview.
insight. It's really about something about, hey, this is an evolving issue, you may be interested, because I'd love to tell you that I can predict exactly, oh, this is something DEI would want to take a look at. Sometimes you offer a perspective that says, I didn't think of it that way, and that would be good. But looking at the newsletter, some of those things, I tell the departments, before we even are thinking of putting this on the agenda, we need to take a look at this from a, to kind of feel out the council, get feedback on issues, and that's usually why I do that. Similarly, I would also suggest you take a look at some of the other boards and commissions, because this board and the SAB, the tough part is you're kind of interested in a lot of different things, because it's really about putting a lens on it, and that's hard. But if you are aware of something going on, say at the Plan Commission, or traffic, or something, or in the case of Dora, the bid, there might be something that if you pick up on it, let us know, and then we could schedule it for you to get your eyes on it and give us some input. I mean, that's a good idea.
Is there something like a tool or something that would help facilitate staff to be able to flag some of those items more easily to bring it to DEI? Like, we have the list of some of the types of policies, but do you feel confident that staff have what they need to know what would go to DEI?
I would say we're learning. I don't want to think that somebody might think that, oh yes, they could say, oh yeah, I can do that. And then, but what about this one you didn't bring to us? I think it's a learning process, and I think we have a lot to learn. And but that's, I think, part of it. The other thing I think would help is the completion of the strategic plan. Then that's something we can take a look at and say, okay, these are definite priorities for the committee. And so then we can look at it and say, that's something we need to anticipate. We need to do a better job of anticipating. And I think as we get used to it, I think we'll get better at it.
To Mark's point, getting your strategic plan completed and ready, so you have actionable items that you can start putting on your agenda and whittling away at is vitally important. The advisory part of your body here and any of the boards and commissions is to advise council on topics that you think are relevant to us, or that you find important, that you would like us to possibly take some action on, or at least know your thoughts on. Or two, if we have something that we think should come to you, we send it your way, and then you take it up and once again advise on it. But that strategic plan puts in place then that you're not jumping from topic to topic and at the headline grabbing one, but you're also having things that are carrying over from meeting to meeting that are substantive that you're working on. Instead of just the urgent ones, it's also about creating a long-term working flow for the group. That way you have the ability to advise on bigger picture topics as well. It's tough. There are plenty of boards and commissions that meet that don't send any recommendations to council for months or a long time, but then long range finance, we work on different policies, and then when they're ready, when they're come to fruition, then they go on and council can act or not.
I have
We
to
also- oh,
weigh
sorry.
in on this, if I may. Just thank you for being here. Number one, I would just say it's welcome and it's overdue. These are no discussions these are nothing new. These communication breakdowns have been occurring from the start. We've never had a formal way to actually engage. It's always been after the fact. We finally figured out, hey, let's just get some of what you're looked at the first part of the month, give us some heads up as to what we may have some insight into. So yes, I think one Lindsay, thank you for pointing out, we have some very gross buckets here of health, housing, and economic mobility. Now, for me, I think I could probably parse through any number of the agendas that are coming for you and bucket them into health, housing, or economic mobility. And if they don't fit into there, well, then maybe we drop them into this tool or something that maybe we're just kind of scratching at the surface of, like, well, what metrics are we gonna look at? Like, what's the scale? What 4 measures? How can we decide a quadrant out? Maybe we come down and do a little workshop with admin here to figure out, hey, these are our 4 main sort of criteria that maybe we're looking at. Maybe we can parse it into a couple of areas so that you have a way to scale it and measure it, so that if it doesn't fit into one of these 3, health, housing, or economic mobility buckets, drop it into that little scale and you can kind of determine, hey, does this fit? And if you have a question, I'm sure our chair or vice chair would be able to help weigh in on that. I just think there's no way we're going to be able to serve as a resource or make recommendations or advise on anything post-fact unless we get this communication one worked out. So that, to me, under duty number 1, it's critical. I mean, how are we going to do any of that? Facilitating input from all geographic areas. We've talked about city capabilities and technologies and all of that multiple times in our committee. And I still have to feel like we are not leveraging the resources. Now, it took some time, but we have a Facebook page on there, but that's all internally controlled. Not that I want control or any other council member or advisory board member wants control, but I think that's something there. But we're learning. We figured out, okay, if we have something, we can talk about it here. We can send it over. It'll be reviewed for appropriateness or whatever measures you need to go through before it's posted. But that's one means, of doing community outreach. So we've talked about different mechanisms, but I just still find, as a city, we have so many tools. And we also know that there's a lot of people that do not have direct access to media, or they're limited on data, so they're not going to be using apps as much. They're not going to be on their phone. They might not have internet. I would say if we really want to truly have some impact in our ability to encourage people to come to these forums, to provide some citizen input just within our own advisory body proper, we need a campaign. A PR campaign, a marketing campaign, just like you would do for any other little event or something. Now, can we do that as an advisory board? Initially, it took forever to figure out, do we even have a budget? We have no money. We're an advisory body. We're not given any authority. We can make recommendations. So we've learned now really that, okay, what you, Mr. Murgauer, are saying is a strategic plan. I would say it's not really a strategic plan. It is a report of recommendations, and some things that maybe performance, this is something we can dig into because this has caused a lot of, I'd say, confusion as to who gets one part internal, what's external, things like, so that's something that might be worth digging into a little more. We just moved ahead to create a format and started pushing some stuff and starting to pull something together because we recognize, yes, this is a tool that once developed, it's at least a guidepost to give you an insight as to what we're thinking. But what we're thinking might not have anything to do with what city is being presented with making decisions on. So, there's going to be some amorphousness to this, but I think that would be a really good thing to continue to work through. But I just say, if we need to put, say, a recommendation that we need to develop a public relations campaign and a marketing campaign to encourage, and let people know that DEI has a role in the city, that people can come here, well, then I guess we need to add that, Angie, to our list and add this to our plan here. And maybe it would be, but these things are sort of unfolding as we go. So I would just say this, that within the 1-year criteria creation, that was the lofty goal. We all recognize that it hasn't occurred and we're still struggled by it, and with some of those, but we're working through that. I don't know, and to educate the public. Okay, we had something about a public education plan, and I will say to any of this, it's not that we're lacking ideas. Sometimes it comes down to we don't have the resources, nor do we know where the resources are going to come from or who we can lean on or what we can do to really carry out some of these duties. And this is just my opinion. I'll ground it all in this. Everybody can disagree with me if you feel the need, by all means. But the last thing I want to say is it makes it really, really, really difficult for us to carry out any of these duties when we are held to the same, and I don't want to say restrictions, but standards, and they are restrictions when it comes to public meetings and our records. And what we were told, from, legal counsel as it kind of filters down to us to, and reminded again, hey, there's these things with walking quorums or what rules you can meet before it's considered needs to have public notice in it. When I reread some of that stuff today, again. Maybe it's a different day, new eyes. I'm reading it again. I'm like, well, man, we could have been working on this here. We could have been working on this here. But I would just say this, it just makes it difficult to really get into the meat of some of this. Well, I do agree, a roadmap, a plan, we call it strategic plan or just a report, would help us sort of stay on target as we shift chairs. But that's all I can say. I'm glad you're here, and thanks for listening. We do have a lot of work to do, but I think it really starts with even this very beginning. How do we figure out, is it housing, economic mobility and health? And then if it's too gray for that, what kind of tool can we develop to like help, determine, hey, this should come to us? Or by default, my default is like, just run everything past the group. As soon as there's something under consideration, let us know. If it's something that fits or strikes a chord with one of us, great. But I will acknowledge not every one of us has the same time, mind, or ability to plug into this stuff. Well, I may have a week where I can really dig into what's going on at the city. Mouche maybe is in it all the time. My friend here, he's so busy. Others, I don't know. But I think collectively, if you just give us as much notice as possible without really a whole lot of expectation, and not like we need ownership or we're trying to insert ourselves into internal business or step on anybody's toes or do anybody's job. But I just find that we've been sort of struggling to find some meaningful ways to provide something of substance in a timely manner. We can continue to chip at some of these other things, which I would equate as sort of soft, public outreach and, events. And, well, it's important to make a welcoming community. It's important there. I think there are some more critical, like meaningful things that you all have to decide on. That, what I understood the charge of this was perhaps to sort of give council, whoever's in your positions, to get a little more insight and a little more insight, and help make, get some broader input from the circles that you may run in. I don't know. Anyhow, I'll stop there and thank you for my time.
Well, I'm sure that council would agree. We appreciate all of the effort because this is one of the boards and committees that meets a significant amount of time and does a significant amount of work. But I think the timing of this coming together in this review is actually very good because of the budget calendar. And so if you look at item 4 under duties, where there's reference to the specific progress and future goals tied to those department level equity performance metrics and progress on those performance metrics being reported in this annual city budget. So just recently we passed the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, and November 9th we'll be passing the operating piece, the full budget package. And so this is actually a really great time, I think, for folks to maybe become acquainted and be participatory in the budget process as well, especially since this is one of the few boards and commissions that has a specific relationship with the budget named in its creation.
I'll take this moment to welcome Lakeisha and Saida. Welcome. Can we make sure that they have a mic over there?
Yeah, we'll
Thank you.
we'll move some down.
Okay.
You two share. I'll share with Mouche.
That's right. Towards you when you want it.
Are we able to ask questions of the? Is that actually?
Yes, please go ahead.
Are you having issues getting things on agendas? Because I kind of keep going back to what is this the formal way you can communicate to the council with recommendations on things, whether it's related to a specific, piece of legislature, right, ordinance coming, resolution, or just something you guys all think are important, and just curious, right? Are you getting things on the agenda that you need to get on the agenda?
On our agenda or council's agenda?
On your agenda.
On our
so that you
agenda.
can vote on something, so it gets on our agenda.
We've had a full agenda since this, since meeting 1. And, the first year, I think we spent the first few months getting to know some of the community players in these different roles and these different departments. To go back to Mark, I think you made a great suggestion around like reading the city manager's report and gleaning some information on, what intersections that we can look at with our committee. But as Ashley said, our committee intersects every and all, what feels like every and all departments, and you can take that equity lens and test that across across all the different boards and commissions, and so for our group, part of our work is to clarify, I think, and prioritize, but as Ashley emphatically stated, due to resources or just maybe the task ahead, I think we're getting there, but it's been
I'd like to add to that.
Yeah.
We've had moments in the past where things that have been requested to get put on the agenda were sort of siphoned through and filtered out, those things have occurred. I don't believe we're going to run into that anymore. I think we have now a better understanding about how to work through and just clear the way that if we want something in the agenda, we will get it on the agenda. We won't be constrained so much by some other things, but we've worked through that. It had been a moment or two in the past.
Good, and I only asked that because, I can tell you at least, and I can't, again, speaking for myself as one council member, one of my frustrations is hearing things second and third hand after the fact, when it's like, the mechanism by which we get formal feedback are these
that's how
votes.
we feel.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
We're getting it secondhand. Yeah.
But yeah, that
Empathy,
won't be,
that's
that's not gonna be an issue.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I would just like to suggest that maybe we do have some formal means to sit down so that at the very least, Lindsay, you were touching on it, and like, how do we really help administration determine if this is something, or is there a way to do this? If you're not gonna go by default, just, hey, carte blanche, just look at whatever's coming, whatever that may look like. I can't pretend to know. Or we just look at health, housing, and economic mobility as the starting points, of things that council will be looking at or asked to make a decision on. I kind of feeling like we have to defer to you all to make that decision, It's like I can provide inputs, but
So
I don't
that
know.
has happened, that's happened on a number of occasions with some of our boards and commissions. It's not unique to DEI, where the board is created or it's in place, and there's almost a waiting to see what staff or council recommends. So the advisory piece is we're looking to you to advise us on things as we form these ordinances or these policies. So it's kind of like you talked about a lack of clarification between the internal and the external. So it's like the extra pair of external ears for the community, and that geographic representation that's talked about. Kind of like our council is at large. We don't have aldermanic districts. So trying to, hear from all parts of the community, geographically speaking, as well as from those that we don't typically hear from. And I think that was really part of the spirit and intention of creating this, which took a number of years to get there. So not expecting miracles overnight. But there have been other boards and commissions who have kind of like the tail wagging the dog, right? Like, well, if council would let us know what to do, and so we can't do it all, 7 of us for 67,000 people, and that's why we have these additional advisory boards. It's like we're kind of finger pointing at each other, but we're working collaboratively. And I just want to reference something real quick, if I may. I'm working on my second time reading through The Abundant Community, Awakening the Power of Families and Neighborhoods. It was kind of a community read in a number of communities in Wisconsin a few years back. But one of the things that I'm really emphasizing is when we talk about like community properties and capacities, a competent community has 3 properties: focus on the gifts of its members, nurture associational life, and offer hospitality. That is the welcoming of strangers. And I really feel like going back to Ben Stepanek in the early days of talking about diversity coordinators and then the study that came out of looking at the diversity coordinator was the recommendation for the formation of this. And you guys are doing it. It may not be on paper in a formal strategic plan format right now, but you are creating those things.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, I think we made a formal recommendation to council for hiring that strategic, or that diversity coordinator, finding a way to fund a position for the city, but, you know, I don't know if where that went, or where did that, I know it was under consideration on our,
Was that voted on with DEI? I haven't seen
There
it
was
come
never a
through.
formal recommendation.
No, but
We've talked about it, but
within
I
the
think we-
past month, because the plan wasn't done, I knew that based on conversations that the committee did want to pursue that. And if you look later on in the meeting, there is an item about 2023 budget requests. I anticipated that the committee would want to ask for it, so I suggested that it be put on the agenda so that you could make that. Now, timing is kind of the essence because the council's going to be presented with the budget in a couple weeks. Now, a request like this typically falls under what we call budget enhancements. So it would be on the list of budget enhancements for council's consideration. But because the workshop's coming up, I asked that it be talked about last month. Yeah, but we didn't have a quorum, but we have a quorum tonight, so that's good. But the idea was, I've put a place marker in there because
Yes.
I know that is not a deep, dark secret of the committee. You've been pretty upfront about that, so it's like, rather than say, oh, sorry, you missed the deadline, because technically, the deadline was last month, I didn't want to hold up what the committee wanted to at least express. So I would certainly suggest that if you want to advocate, this is a good time to do it, because the council's going to be looking at many different budget enhancements. So just be aware that there's a lot of stuff going on in the next month for the council. But I knew that to ignore that and not have a form from you would have just been disingenuous to you, and I didn't want to do that.
Before we move on to that, though, is there anything that needs to be clarified from council to this body? You've got us, you've got a majority of us, whether individually or collectively. We're here to clarify what your role is, what we want from you. You have our ears in terms of if there's things you need or things you think are in your way for us to comment on. But I guess before we get to any budget things, what do we need to clarify so you guys are able to move forward in a productive fashion?
I have a question that I'd like to ask. So we have started on our strategic plan. It's, I think, close to 20 pages here that we're, drafting and working through. But for example, I'll just read goal number 5, which is representation. City communications celebrate and reflect Oshkosh's diversity, promote a welcoming culture, and are accessible to all. So the 6, I won't read all the indicators, but for example, 5.1, city marketing materials depict diverse people, including those from different racial, ethnic backgrounds, genders, and abilities. 5.2, the number of translated city print materials increases each year. 5.3, city marketing expands the use of different communication channels. Okay, so there's 6 indicators for this one goal. I guess I'd like to ask, do you have any recommendations or suggestions on who would be responsible? Like, if we put together this strategic plan, who would be responsible for carrying out and executing these indicators, and then also collecting the information and data so that we know that those metrics are being made?
Well, previously, in other new created committees, rental housing is the most recent one that I can think of. That's the body's responsibility.
That would be our responsibility?
It's your responsibility. You're creating that. That's your guide map in terms of the work that you want to take up on behalf of the city, on behalf of the community.
But if we're meeting once a month as a group, when does that work happen? And if we can't meet, if no more than 3 of us are able to, well, not even
That's
2
not
of
the
us.
role- That's not an I'm sorry, Angela, it's not an advisory body's function to carry out the job of the city. These are things, are recommendations for the city to take action on. These are recommendations to the city proper and departments, and you guys figure out where it needs to land. But I honestly, this is an advisory body. If you want us to carry out a full function of the city, then I think we need to be more than an advisory body. And I also think we need to have some paid staffing to support such a role, because this is nothing short of full-time work and then some. And I don't mean to disrespect either of you, but this is kind of my
That's
nature.
where I
I
need
jump
the
in at times. We have a
clarification,
short
yes.
time.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Angie? Are those the measures that the departments submitted to you?
No,
Cool,
these
that's
are
a good
separate.
discussion.
Those
Yes.
are different, and I bring that up, and again, and I've said this over and over again, we screwed that up. I mean, we promised you it in a year, and we didn't do it as a city. So I think that part of the reason that we're struggling in this ambiguous world is that we didn't hold up our end of the bargain. So I'm hoping this can be a restart point on that regard. But I do think, and this ties into your point, Ashley, I think on those department-provided measures, I mean, you have a very clear goal or clear role in the ordinance where you have to sign off on those as a body every year. Do you agree with these? And you get to set goals. And I think that's a really formal, that it's in the ordinance.
I read it, but I think there was some big disagreement as to what that actually looked like in reality. And I say that because we provided some significant potential metrics and measures to draw from. Some may have been included, some weren't. I'm not really
Well,
certain.
and
But okay,
again,
go
I
ahead.
think it's, again, going back to what the ordinance had to say, the intent was for the departments were
Yeah.
for purposes of buy-in, to give them to you. So I think that it's
We
important
worked through that.
to separate. Yeah, I know. I'm not trying to be standoffish, I promise. I think it's important to separate, right, and I think this is what the deputy mayor was getting at, correct me if I'm wrong, but a strategic plan what you're producing there is goals for your individual body, right? So you're trying to produce a pathway for your specific board. I mean, we're doing this on Committee on Aging, this is happening on advisory bodies throughout the city, and that's important where you have to be realistic. Yeah, to Ashley's point, no, you can't put in goals there and be expected to execute them on behalf of the city. I mean, I think those department-provided measures, that is really your direct link to city operations. In that regard, you're influencing what the city's actually doing, but the city's the implementer. So I don't want to say that you're being too ambitious with that, but I think it's important to understand that the goal there is for you to be able to set goals for your governing body that's realistic given the resources you have.
Gotcha. Thank you for
Okay.
clarifying. And Matt, now I'm understanding what you were saying as well, because this mashup, having all that language mashing both these things up into this, it's creating something that's along these lines. We have been under the illusion, apparently, that we're supposed to be providing additional measures and metrics and things for the city to be following and carrying out for various departments, okay? Now, yeah, okay, so we're gonna report that those measures we've approved for internal work. Well, then, to me, like, okay, geez, we're running down the wrong path on this. I mean, unless there's somebody that's gonna be here to support it, because as an advisory body, it doesn't make any sense. So if we need to scale this back and simply say, all right, well, we're gonna have one community event this year, or two of them, and really plan it back to being just as what we always started with from the very beginning. Are we just gonna be out there, is this just fluff? Are we just to be only really influencing external affairs? Because I have to say, we really kind of made some concessions, you know, and I get it, and compromises with the existing internal measures and metrics that were put forth for us to approve. There was definitely compromise, I felt, at least from our side, to get something on paper. Because I don't know, I'll stop. But this brings a great deal of clarity. And I don't know, Angie, if it makes anything clearer to you, or Moshe, but please, or, you know, Saida or Lakeisha, or, you know, anybody. What I just heard here says, focus on the first three, really, and just wait until we get the report to see how you're making progress internally. And if there's something we can maybe influence and add to the internal work, maybe we can, but
Well, to the mayor's point, I mean, that's why it's in there as something that needs to be reviewed by this body every time the budget comes around. I mean, that's very deliberate.
yeah.
Because if you, let's say, for example, let's stop using the word strategic plan.
Thank you.
Let's use the word action plan for this body. It's kind of your to-do list of things that you want to review, to make recommendations to the internal and for external, for the tactical or the implementation, the how to execute those items. And so I think that, if it was ambiguous in the ordinance and that hasn't been communicated clearly, then big apologies from the council for not making that more clear.
Wow. I think Ashley has put it very correctly here, because for me, over the last year or so, I've openly criticized city council like this city council is not serious when it comes to this work. And clear for me, I think today is only the first time I'm getting openly clear what we're doing. We're like in the wrong direction. Even then, I still have questions of the same measure that are happening internally, because we don't have anybody who's professionally hired in an admin level to check in, like, is every staff doing what they're supposed to do? Who's responsible? Who's responsible to check if Mark Roloff is doing what he's supposed to do? So these are the questions that I think are still lingering within me, that even if this internal have their own measures, there's no one really there out there to check. You see, I have this question.
Yeah.
There's no one internal to check who's doing who. Because I think most of the time I run into this thing, every time I hear about a diversity coordinator position or diversity coordinator person, it seems to be, it's going to be the job of that person to actually check on people. That's how it is viewed sometimes. But I feel like it shouldn't be like that work be focused on one individual. I think it should be like, there should be like some professional staff around that individual, that person. But I think right now, I don't even know where we're headed. If we end up having one, for example, I don't know, somebody has to explain to me how it's going to happen.
I think early on with DEI, I think everybody received a copy of the diversity coordinator study within that first 6 months of formation, because there were some items in there specifically about, I want to say, the possibility of also being a grant seeker for resources to execute some of the recommendations. And since that position did not get created, and it was thought that there might be discussion from this group and formal recommendation or not in the budget process of whether or not to create a position. I will say it's my understanding that that the SAB may also be putting forth a budget enhancement for a sustainability coordinator. And I've anticipated that there may be some variation of that may be coming from this group. And I wonder if there is an opportunity, because we had an environmental justice resolution within the past year. And I'm also wondering if there are pieces of the sustainability plan and pieces of what you guys are working on for your action plan that end up overlapping. Might there be a discussion about an environmental justice? I'm not trying to prescribe a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. I'm only saying that I know that this council will be facing a lot of very difficult budget decisions. We do that every year, but certainly we would like to have you as partners in that process.
Well, I'll say to Moshe, you've never been critical of a council member. No. He's critical to my
thick
face, though,
skin.
so I appreciate Moshe.
We can take it. We got thick skin.
But to your specific questions, Moshe, the body who's in charge right now, the way this is set up as a governing entity, would be the Common Council. It would be that you're putting these goals, and we're reviewing them by ordinance every budget. So we would be that. That's the governance side. Now, if there's a need for the operational side, it's in your charge too under 4B to recommend additional resources necessary to achieve said goals. So we're not here to tell you what to do, but if that was something that you thought there's a need for operational support, I mean that's in your charge as well to ask for it. And I know I sound like a broken record. I'm a nerd when it comes to government, but that's why it's so important to make sure you're able to get the things that you need on your agenda so that you can make formal asks. so we have something to consider, and it's not just kind of hearsay in a game of telephone.
And if I can just bring up like a specific example, just to talk about here too. It was mentioned earlier, Ashley, that we do have a portion of our population that does not have internet access. I believe the last thing I read, and I don't recall what year this is from, was that like 17% of the city, according to the census, has no internet access. So what are the best practices around that other communities are doing to bridge that inequity? Might that, I'm not saying you put that on your list, but might that be a piece that this group studies to look at some potentially best practices, to perhaps make some recommendations?
Yeah, I would say Ashley, just, I'm not sure if that was a specific page that you wanted to mention or you just randomly picked it. There were things in there, it's like, those are things that I could see coming from the committee and saying, all right, let's look at how are we doing on our marketing materials. I mean, those are legitimate issues that I think I think that's why having the committee give us that type of input would be very valuable. So I could see those things. I may not agree on everything, but I certainly got to come, well, that's good. But at the same time, there's a lot of things like, sort of like a light bulb moment. I never thought of that. And I think that's the value that the committee can bring us. And I would look forward to the input of everybody as you go through that document and eventually produce something that gives us something to take a look at. And eventually, council will approve that. And then it becomes sort of the guidepost for us.
I don't know, Angie or Michelle, but, and anybody else, Said, if you've had a chance to look at our current draft of recommendations, what we're putting together is our plan of action. Given what I'm just hearing now, and if it's gonna be on us to monitor, I think we could probably get you some things like tomorrow. I mean, there's enough in there, like if it's on us to monitor, to track, and just to give you something really meaty and concrete and sort of narrow in sort of scope and focus, so it's something that maybe is more actionable to your end, like, I don't know, I'm sorry, y'all are suffering through me having a moment of clarity here and all of this, so it's, I don't know, I have a lot more confidence that we can get you things on the regular, given this, because this document then doesn't need to be nearly so robust, doesn't need to be nearly so thought out, it doesn't need to be nearly so completed, from what I'm hearing. I mean, that can happen at some point, but if it's really about getting a couple of things that we can focus on this year and watch and monitor and bring to you guys, and if that's really, and ladies, I'm sorry to say guys all the time, but then all right, fine.
I do think though there is a lot of great things in those documents.
Not to say we'd scrap it by any means, but
like for example, like the education center, like that's a big goal, but I think it's something worth, putting resources and time, and I think something that should be recommended. But that's just an example where, that's why I kind of like the structure of the plan that you created. But I do understand that it seems that that's not exactly what.
maybe more than what anybody is really looking for. So
Can I ask, is your consultant that you've been working with, like, participating regularly with you?
We didn't invite him tonight because of this, but we would have, he was here at our last meeting, wasn't he? Yeah, he was
Been
here.
at most of our meetings, even the ones that weren't meetings.
But I guess what is the question is, has he been working? Like, I'm not really sure.
I was just curious about, when we talk about resources that you need, that was one that we made a specific,
Certainly.
I believe Deputy Mayor, I think Mike, you were here when that was initiated, the budget before last, that those resources, those dollars would go to make that
That was an
available to
enhancement.
you.
Lori, that was an
year.
enhancement that we voted for.
Yes.
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 Yes, it
Yes,
was.
so
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure that you had access and they were participating.
I'm not chair, so I'm sort of not plugged into some of those resources as I once was, if you will.
Well, the committee has to make a recommendation, so if they wanted to give direction to Alonso, you could do that. That's just a matter of, as
I
a
thought
group.
Well, but I
Alonso
think
was
there's some
helping them work
limitations.
on developing this plan. Am I misinformed?
Was
No.
kind of the
That was
intent.
part of it.
Yes.
I guess
Okay. Yes.
here's a question. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was around $5,000 that we
No, it was
was it more
25.
25 to 30,000, wasn't it, Fitz?
that we approved that we were, and I don't know
Alonso. yeah.
what it was strictly tied to, but what of that money has been spent and what hasn't been spent on.
Don't
Michelle,
know the
can
exact
you-
number. I don't know, Michelle.
Sure, I certainly don't have an exact number, but certainly we've been spending money on Alonzo as a consultant, both for the DEI committee as well as for internal DEI-related activities. And we are also utilizing that money for employee training. So.
You shared that with me, thank you.
Okay, and I would say we have probably spent 2/3, I'm gonna say, of that money at this point, for the year.
And I would just add too, and this hasn't been a secret to the committee, we shared with the committee that Alonzo's role was to be a stopgap to help construct the plan, a stopgap until such time when we could potentially secure a diversity coordinator. So that was made known very frequently to the committee. So it shouldn't be a mystery to anyone here or anyone else on the committee what Alonzo's role is or what his responsibility is. As a matter of fact, the committee asked for those resources, just as they did earlier, because they felt they didn't have any staff, they didn't have any resources. So in response to that, we constructed that request to go to council to secure those monies. And in addition to that, we thought Alonzo would be a good bridge not only to a diversity coordinator, but also from the external role that's identified in the charter, that's the responsibility of the committee, and our internal committee, because he's a resource to both. So he could provide information and updates periodically and consistently. So that's really the purpose of Alonzo. And we've discussed that frequently in committee meetings.
So,
Just to
I'm sorry
clarify.
if this is like, I need a brick over the head here. So is Alonso charged with a tangible work product of a document in working with DEI? I don't know if that's.
Alonzo's responsibility is to act as a consultant for us when we work with our employee committee and also with the DEI committee to help them construct their plan.
Sure. So,
I'd say the
then-
short answer is no. The short answer is, yeah, the longer answer is that he's to work with DEI and follow whatever direction they want to give him, ask him for assistance and everything. I don't know if they've gotten to that point yet, but that is available to them. But for him to be, he wasn't contracted specifically to write the plan. It was
No.
really to facilitate, and I
Be a
think,
resource.
yeah, to be a resource and to help facilitate that discussion.
Kind of a classic consultant. Here's some really good advice and some work, now
usually
go do
there's a
it.
scope document that spells out what's delivered,
Not things that
you know.
would-
Well, and the clarification that we just came upon tonight was what we've been working through with Alonzo. Alonzo has been really amazing at trying to help us clarify, again, the things that we're trying to clarify. And so he's played an integral role in dissecting this. But now that this is clear and, or this is clearer, I think we have more of an idea of how to best tap into his skills and his consulting. I want to be mindful of the time. We've been discussing this for about an hour, which is the time that we've allotted. Are members of this room okay with continuing this discussion if there are further questions or? Okay. Any objections? All right. Because I need a brick over my head, I'd like to just go through duty 4 and just ask straight out. So duty 4 reads, within 1 year of creation, report to the city manager and common council on goals of the committee and identify A, 5 to 7 equity performance measures for each city department developed by each department and approved by the committee. So, can we start with point A, which is 5 to 7 equity performance measures? Are those the equity measures that the city created then?
Yeah, and that the committee approved back
Right.
about 4 months ago.
Okay. So
Like that, yeah.
we can check that off as
Yeah.
completed? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I think that's a breathing document, and I think, that's,
Sure.
I think our first attempt, I predicted we would probably tweak them, and if we see identify other measures, I think we have to be open to those things, and as we learn more, we'll do better.
If you don't mind, can I make just a brief comment on that one? I know I've had discussion with another council member on this one in the past. I can't stress enough, you are the only body that we have empowered with that type of oversight or authority or buy-in to that process. There's no other board and commission that is a part of that. But from some of the feedback we've received is that those weren't wanted or those weren't something that this committee maybe didn't want as part of their charter. So that was definitely something I wanted to hope to clarify tonight, that that's something that this body does have interest in being a part of, that's a strong thing for this body to make sure that they're a part of and to advise staff and then us on. But that was some feedback that we had received through different channels and wanted to make sure that was really clear tonight on the importance of that you are the only body that gets that participation on that.
Well, that we're the only body, but that's good to know, and absolutely, we have an interest on it, because I know I myself and Angie and Mouche, we all put a fair amount of energy into looking at different points of how you can talk to what that speaks of, long list of potential metrics to utilize. Very specific and pointed outcomes and measures to be, using as guide. We had some very detailed input. So there's definitely an interest.
Good.
And then as far as B goes, so you're doing A, you are doing B by having requested those additional resources, such as the consultant, but perhaps there are other resources, whether it be pen and paper or diversity coordinator or PR campaign, you're doing it. C, information relative to community diversity, equity, and inclusion to share with the general public and underserved populations. I guess, that's kind of the work that you're doing is information. But we are assuming or presuming, or I am, that you are informing that work from the community. So I think you're doing A, B, and C. It could be perhaps that, part of that action plan is D, identifying best practices on some of those other related things. But I don't want to tell you how to do this because it's sometimes hard to know when you're actually doing it. It's kind of like riding the bike and somebody's hanging on back there and training wheels off.
Well, as part of this, I'm going to call it the strategic plan, that we do have a list of best practices for health, housing, and economic mobility that we can pass on, I think, within the next month. And again, I guess I would ask, or I'm curious about if these are not metrics, they're just recommendations. How do we ensure that, that these are being considered, thought about, and, considered as far as policy?
I would say the last line of D, where it says that the city may consider adopting, and I know that's not like a guaranteed, it has to be adopted, but in my mind, when this plan is created and finished, it comes to council to review and choose to adopt based on
Thank
what
you,
you've
Aaron.
recommended and presented to us.
Okay.
Agree with Aaron.
I don't know if that encapsulates all, but the way it says create a report with these measures, these 4 things within that report. It's all housed in one report that we eventually review. I don't know. Does that sound
The
accurate?
accountability piece is whether it makes it into the budget,
Okay.
if that's blunt enough.
I would say, taking a look at number 4, before we got into A, B, and C, it was on goals of the committee. So that's where the strategic plan and all that stuff, because then you can fit these things, and this is how this fits in with the different goals. So they're geared towards the goals, because it's identify A, B, C, and D. So I think identifying them, weaving them into your goals would be the appropriate way to do it. So yeah, you guys are on your way. I don't know if I'd say they still have a little more work to do on information relative to DEI to share with the general public, but I think that'll come. I mean, they've certainly discussed a lot of these things. The committee hasn't necessarily said formally, we agree on A, B, or C. But they've certainly discussed them enough times.
Mark, if I could just split a hair one moment here. So the way I just heard that from you is that there's an expectation of informing the public, but the way that this reads is identifying information relative to the community and presumably reporting that back. So are we talking about 2 different functions of information?
No, I don't think so.
Because I was thinking of it in the internal and external, and the way we've got it written here is identifying the information relative to community, like that external component, and advising us on that. But I thought I heard you say an expectation of informing the public, because we do have both of those in there through the number 3 with the educate the public.
Yeah.
So
No,
I
I
didn't
don't-
know if that was like a question or clarification.
No, I don't think so.
It makes sense, right? The 3 is them educating the public, 4 is them educating us.
Yeah, because when you get into best practices, those are things that they would be recommendations on things we could adopt and actually implement. We have to take a look at that, but they would identify those best practices. We've looked at these different communities, they are doing some really cool things, and Angie, isn't a lot of the document you were using started with Beaverton, Oregon, if I recall? Yeah, so I mean, we're not Beaverton, but it's a good script, and I think you've been looking at that very strongly as a good model for the committee. And you start somewhere.
Can I ask, and I apologize for getting here late, I got stuck traveling. Maybe this was covered already, but have you guys been collaborating with the university at all? I mean, because they've got a pretty good DEI committee over there in process. Have you guys kind of collaborated with them at all in this process at all?
I think respective, or, I know Mouche has connections to the university, I've got some connections. I think respectively, we've individually been doing that, but we have not invited, I guess, anyone to our committee meeting. So if that answers your question.
Okay. Do they have any resources they could help with or anything like that, or do we know? Lori, do we know if they've got?
I don't know who the new vice chancellor is for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know that they recently, I want to say within the last year, lost someone. There might be an interim right now.
Dr. Johnson, Dr. Alicia Johnson.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Dr. Johnson has.
I got to give you we're sharing the mic there.
We're sharing the mic. Yes, the resources Angie is talking about, yes, they are available at the university. Not official, yes, we've spoken with those officials. Dr. Johnson has indicated several times that she would be willing to come in and work with us.
Okay.
We gave her an invitation. So we do have those resources, and I think that collaboration between the city and the university or the county sometimes is very necessary, because more often I've observed like we have all these little pockets. These guys are doing their own things, these guys are doing their own things. So I think for our committee, I think it's very important we take this opportunity and get whatever we can get from other groups here. So we'll talk with them, I think, if our chair is interested. I think we should approach the university for that.
And if I can just offer, Dr. Johnson personally worked with a team of people that gathered the 1,500 signatures that created this committee.
Oh, that's right.
So it's very fitting that, that she is now in the role that she is
Right.
as interim DEI vice chancellor, I believe it is. I don't know if I got the title right, but
Must be.
previously, before she was in that role, was extremely active in working, although she wasn't directly on the committee, she was supporting, and that group was supporting this committee formation.
Great, thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions, comments?
Just
Madam
one-
Chair, could I ask, would you like council to remain here while you're reviewing your item X, or 10, the budget request?
I think there would be a natural flow to that conversation. So,
She's looking at-
if there are no other further comments? or
I was just going to say
Okay.
one thing. Ashley had brought something up earlier, and I want to make sure. I know the committee when they were early on in the process, and I really look at the three of you because the three, Angie, Ashley, and Mushe have really been the sort of the stalwarts of the committee from day one. There's nothing wrong with the committee wanting to have subcommittees or have a group of people. The only thing is you just have to notice them, but that doesn't prevent you from having them. We can't get around that part of it, but if you want 3 people to get together to talk about something, all we need to do is post it, where it's going to be, and what time. The door has to be open for, or at least openable for people to come in. And we don't have a lot of them, but we've had subcommittees of the council where it's 2 people. It's only 2 people, yet we have a committee. So that's totally okay, and we can certainly facilitate that. They don't have to be held here at City Hall. All we got to do is make sure it's accessible. Technically, you could say we're going to meet at Planet Perk, and that's okay as long as you publicly notice it. So I want to make sure that you know that you've got that flexibility. Just because there's certain requirements that you got to follow, it doesn't mean you can't do it. We have committees that do that periodically, not a lot, but a few, and that's totally appropriate. I guess it all depends on what the committee as a whole, because I know there was one point about, no, let's include the whole committee. No, let's do a subcommittee, and gone back and forth. You can go either way, and I want you to know that, and we can help facilitate that.
Reminder.
And I guess I'd just like to ask a question, because I was trying to find in their rule book, I know it's in our charter, that references the mayor or council can create subcommittees, but I don't know if it's in their charter that they can create them directly, or if that matters.
It's really,
Because it's a working group,
it's,
right?
for example, what's the Robert's Rules of Orders talk about creating subcommittees and things. You can create subcommittees, that's not a problem. It's just that when you do, that committee has to be noticed, that's all. And we can notice, as long as it's got, I believe, 48 hours or 24. As long as we have 24-hour notice, we can do it. So if you said, hey, we want to get together on Thursday, as long as we put it up, Thursday at 10 o'clock, as long as we put it up by Wednesday at 10 o'clock, you guys are good to go.
Are there other questions for the council before I just want to make sure that you've been heard, right?
Questions? You have questions for us? Are you free to go? Go.
Yeah, I got plans. No, I just want to say thank you for inviting us here, and thank you for the work you do. I know that, I think again, from conversations I've had with individuals on the committee, that it hasn't always gone the way you hoped it would go, and that communication hasn't always been perfect. And for that, I mean, I think I'm happy to apologize, if we didn't hold up our end of the bargain along the way. But I do hope you know that I don't think I'm speaking just for myself, and we recognize that a city that doesn't work for all of us is a city that isn't working. And we need this, and we need your work, we need you to stick to it, and we need to stick to it. So I'm hopeful this will be a point where we move forward productively. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
And if
Appreciate
I
your
could
time.
just ask one question, and that is, I know that there's an event that was discussed about planning for this year, but it's my understanding it's occurring next year. Is it too early for us to announce that date? Has that been decided? It's the weekend after Labor Day, is that right?
I believe
Do you have a working title that you're
September
calling it?
Oshkosh Harvest Moon Festival.
Oshkosh Harvest Moon.
It's either the 10th or the 11th, I believe.
2023.
2023.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Saturday after
Appreciate
Labor
it.
Day?
Thank you, Councilman Ford, for that. And I just want to recognize our other committee members. You know, we gather once a month and we try to collectively move on issues, but, you know, individually, we're all doing the work in our respective spaces. You know, Ashley in housing, Indigenous, like so many different sectors, and Mouche, all of us are doing the work in, you know, in our own ways. And I just want to acknowledge our committee members for doing that work, and whether it's even tending to our families and our children, that is the work. So thank you to our committee members.
Thanks for.
Okay. So Mayor Palmieri has suggested that we, you know, just flow to agenda item 10, which is the budget requests. So with
Now I would suggest that you call the meeting to order.
Right, should we do a quick roll call and call the meeting to?
yes.
Sorry.
Thank you, no, for that reminder, because this was a really great dialogue. Thank you again for being here. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and Michelle, if you could do, or Jenny, if you could do roll call, please.
Lee,
Present.
Sabula,
Present.
Yarnell Lira, Johnson, Hayes,
Present.
Egal, Hesse,
Present.
Wenzelberger, Yang, Benayeg,
Was that the right pronunciation?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, we've done the land acknowledgement, and we'll go ahead and read our mission statement as part of our agenda. We like to remind ourselves what it is that we are working towards and align our missions together. So the mission of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, the DEI Committee, is to create a more welcoming, connected, and equitable Oshkosh by consciously including the richness and complexities of marginalized voices in its planning and function. Okay. All right. We will go ahead and move to agenda item 10. And, you know, as to be respectful of council members that are present. So agenda item 10 pertains to 2023 budget requests. So just to kind of continue the conversation that we started here, would any committee members like to comment on what we would like to see as part of the budget for this upcoming year?
I'd like to discuss maybe setting some funds aside for the Oshkosh School District, mainly the ESL program. I feel like they are a little underfunded and could use a little bit more support. I as well, and I think this all comes from my line of work. I work for World Relief, so I look at some of the needs that a lot of our newcomers who potentially would be, our working force, our future workforce. So again, transportation for the library. We do have a lot of newcomers who participate in English classes, but due to transportation, it's hard to make those classes. So in order to have a productive future workforce, we have to at least invest in, how they learn and get there. So those are my two things that I'd like to maybe discuss for budget.
Thank you, Saida. Any others before we put in the request for a DEI coordinator that we can?
Just something, and again, I apologize because I've not done my homework adequately on this front, but it does come right down to housing and the path to home ownership. And I know we all see that there's a large gap, especially those that are affordable units tend to need a lot of rehabbing. And I know there are some programs for homeowners, some small grant funds, I think they can come through every so often, but really looking at, and I know you did ARPA infrastructure funds, but just really looking at other opportunities to support, renovations, just kind of the capital pieces of rooftop, things that aren't really gonna add value to a home. A lot of homeowners of marginal or lower income can't afford, and then you see that decay, sidings, like some of those things. I don't know what the city can do to really look at some of the programming, and maybe we can make our recommendations, but that's one of those that's really always on my mind, is this path to home ownership, and what kind of partnerships do we have, and have we explored? I mean, I'm seeing examples in our state, so we can dig into details, but that was just something that's on my mind as well, and I don't know what we have for home ownership. And does that include landlords, for better or for worse? I mean, there's a lot of property owners that, and I know we have programs, and it's contentious issues, but
I also want to just top up on what you just said. I've been working with families for the last maybe 7 years or 8 years of refugee background, and they've been living in Oshkosh for this long, but they've reached a position whereby they are ready to buy a house. But the problem that I've found out is in order to get yourself to a position where to buy a house, you need to have a track record of a good credit. Yeah, I am wondering, city manager here, or Mark over there, Councilor Deputy Mayor, if we have that program that can help these families, because they don't have that track record to get them to buy the home, even if they have the money stashed aside over the years. Do we have something that can assist them in buying houses?
Well, maybe what we can do in both those accounts is, we just had a housing study completed, and some of what we talked about was we need to change some of our programs that we currently have. So maybe it would be appropriate to have our Community Development Director, Kelly Nyforth, come and meet with the committee and talk about some of the ideas, because we know people haven't been taking advantage of our programs, and that's to help. It's to help, in some cases, first-time home buyers, in some cases to help people improve existing homes. And we do have programs for rental housing as well. So we've got a variety of programs, but I think we can do a better job of maybe targeting things that people will actually take advantage of. And we might have to, we've discussed about perhaps increasing some of those minimums that we give, because.
The Sold on Oshkosh program, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, just those.
The 5,000 to 10 we talked about?
Yeah, we've only been doing, it's been 5,000 to 10, quite honestly, not a lot of takers. So what more can we do that would be effective? Yeah, so that already exists in the budget, but but we know status quo is not working, and we gotta do better with that. So I think that would be great to talk about that. Again, here's an example of something, thanks for bringing it up, because we may or may not think about it, but when you say it, it's like, oh yeah, this would be a good idea. So I'll talk to Ms. Nyforth about that and maybe schedule her for a future agenda. Not trying to discourage you from a budget request. The budget's there, we just, how do we package it to make it work?
Well, how to get the dollars out the door.
Yeah,
Is really
yeah,
what
be
you're saying.
successful,
We
yeah.
gotta, there's money sitting here, just like with AdvoCap, just like, you know, the rents program and things. The money is there. It's just, how do we get the money out the door? So there's
And there are
a lack of
properties.
funding for those things, so.
And there are properties the city owns as well that are not necessarily developable under our scattered sites. That there's been discussion with the redevelopment authority about putting those out to the community and making that more known, because quite honestly, we have, you know, a number of them that are not necessarily appealing to a large developer, but they might be able to, and we have actually transferred some of those properties to like Habitat for Humanity, who will work. You're talking about the track. If they don't have the track, even if they have the cash set aside, but they don't have the credit
Right.
piece of that, is there another vehicle for the path? And I believe there's some discussions going on regarding NeighborWorks Part 2 as part of one of those paths.
Yeah. There's some cool neighborhood programs going on in Green Bay that we're trying to find a way perhaps to maybe tap into those. And one of the things they've done in recent years is say the 5,000 isn't enough. So, but you're saying there might be some programs where, hey, I got the money, I just, how do I get to the next level? And I'm not exactly sure everything, and I guess having that discussion would probably make a lot of sense. So, yeah, so I'll talk to Kelly about that.
So if our committee would like to put forward a request for a DEI coordinator position, would we vote on that tonight?
I think it's fair game. That's what I was anticipating. So, yeah, I think that's fair. But I would think Saida made a couple suggestions. It's not just one person saying it. The committee needs to say,
Sure.
yes, we feel, you know, strongly about this, to make a recommendation, because it's not that, you know, I suggest those ideas that Ashley and Mouche mentioned only because I think we already have it budgeted. It's just a matter of right sizing it. Is that what you called it, Bill? Or you get right sizing it. Saida, the support for the OASD ESL program, I think you're talking to the wrong budget authority for that. But the second half, I mean, certainly if you want to talk about transportation of the program, our bus system, you could make a suggestion in that. Whether or not it gets any legs, that's number one to this committee, and number two up to council. But we have the transportation department, so yeah, that's technically in the city's collective wheelhouse. But I would suggest you talk to your local school board member about the ESL program at the school district. There's my only 2 cents on that.
I just pulled up Appleton's DEI coordinator position job description, and just going through it, I see that there's a lot of overlap and with what the kind of work that we want to do, some of the goals, you know, that we hope to accomplish with this committee. So is there further discussion from our committee members on why we think this position would be beneficial in achieving those goals that we've been charged with? I think we've been talking about it for many months, so
No, is this really, like, is this it? We just make the case tonight, right here, right now?
I know,
Well,
we've got their ears.
Like, what's the formal?
This is your meeting. Do you mind a question from a council member who eventually is going to ask questions up there if you're not here? So at least you're here to, you know, ask some questions. So you've been talking about it for a while. We haven't. You know, it's something you're going to possibly propose to us. as a council member in my decision-making process, I need to know the why. Because if something gets brought to me with just we want this, where's the substance? So whatever your suggestion is, there's got to be something to it, other than we just want this.
Right, and I know there's a policy analysis out there for such a position. I'm just talking more to the committee members of if they'd like to add any further comment on, any more further comment on this position. I think the goal for tonight then is to come to a consensus that, yes, we do want to move forward with this recommendation, and then from there, we would create that rationale to present to council. So if we're all in agreement, we can make a motion to make that recommendation.
Also move.
Okay. So Jennifer, or is there further discussion or comment? So the motion on the table is to move forward with or move forward on consensus that our committee would like to make that recommendation to council for a position, the DEI coordinator position? Yes, okay. Okay, I think we're ready to take roll or vote on that, right? Okay. Jennifer? Yeah.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah.
Lee,
Yay.
Sabula.
Yeah.
Do I just read everyone that's here then?
Yes.
Okay. Hayes,
Yay.
Egal. Hesse,
Yes.
and Niag.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
What I
Well,
would ask is, part of the process is there's a form that needs to get filled out. What I would suggest is the chair, given the direction of the committee, work with Michelle to put together, because the stuff that Mr. Mugarar points out, that standard exists for
Sure.
every budget enhancement request. So, working with her on that would be appropriate. And I can tell you, I just received the SAB manager request today too, and I did the same thing with SAB, get them working on it. And so one of the members submitted it this afternoon, so.
Does that form include like the why, like why they're requesting or what the purpose is?
Yeah, it's usually in the summary, and
So we don't have to do like two, like separate from that?
I would suggest that it just be simplified and just have the chair work with Michelle on it. I think that's the easiest way. If you want a committee, you can create a quick committee and do it, but you don't have to. I think you've talked about it.
And I think this is history. I mean, this is the first time I've ever been to a meeting where somebody's asked for budget enhancement out of a committee, so congratulations.
Okay. All right. Council members are welcome to stay for our status report on our key performance indicators that will be presented by Mr. Fitzpatrick or Mark or Michelle.
I was just going to say, do you mind if we do quick introductions
Oh,
and
sure.
approve the minutes and some of those
Yes.
basic things we usually do at the beginning of the meeting?
Sure.
But we do have a new member today, Juliana, and of course, I just wanted to take the opportunity for her to introduce herself as well as us to introduce ourselves to her.
Okay, well, I'm not sure exactly how I'm supposed to formally do this, but hi, I'm Juliana. I was an immigrant. I was born in the Philippines, came here when I was 4.5. Now I'm studying sociology with an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm glad to be here. That is all. I'm not sure what else to say.
Welcome. Yeah, welcome, Juliana.
Cool.
What a great
Thank
first
you.
meeting, right? Just, yeah.
I didn't know that there was an emphasis in DEI, so.
Yeah.
Or social equity and diversity. It's worded differently, but pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Jumping right in. Welcome.
We want to do other intros?
Yes.
Even though she's been listening to us
Right,
for,
yeah.
we're practically family now after an hour and a half.
Maybe we'll go around and just say our names. Angie Lee.
Hello, my name's Ashley.
My name is Moshe. I have 3 names. Other one is here, Meshebe, and my last name is Bura.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm Mark Roloff, I'm the city manager. Welcome.
Hi, Bill Miller, City Council.
Saida.
Lakeisha Hayes.
Michelle Banky, we've met.
I'm John, we've met too.
I'm Lindsay on council.
I'm Aaron. I'm also on council. I'm the council rep for this committee.
Mayor Lori Palmieri.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm Jennifer. I'm just the HR assistant.
Just, John.
No, you're not.
You gotta work with Fitz. There's no just to that.
Challenge.
Matt Mugrower, City Council.
Yeah, welcome. Okay. Now we need to approve the minutes from our July 25th meeting. Okay. Do we have a motion to,
I'll move to approve.
You're good down at this end here.
can this be a yay, nay collective? Oh, a discussion? Thank you, Michelle. Any discussion on the minutes from our July meeting?
Probably just an all those in favor.
Okay, all those in favor to approve the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right. Okay, did we have any citizen statements to the committee?
We do not.
Okay, any that submitted public comments?
No public comments.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. All right, now we can skip over to the status report on KPIs.
Yep, staff is just finalizing the KPIs. Obviously, we are close to the end of Q3, so I do expect that the KPIs will be available for review shortly after the end of the quarter.
Okay.
Those currently on the website, or are they going to be?
They,
or in the-
I don't think they are live on the website yet. We have been working on getting them and populating, of course, all the progress.
Okay.
So as far as I know, they are not yet available.
And I can give you a little more background, Aaron. So Diane, Mark's executive assistant, has been working with the other departments, as have I and Michelle. And they have responsibility for the individual KPIs that were approved that relate to their area, because we wanted them to have that ownership and participate. So they're getting that information ready for Q3 to Diane, and then she'll populate the website. So it'll be on our website, and we'll be able to report to the committee. So that's kind of the
Yep, thank you.
additional detail.
Anyone have any questions on that?
Yeah, what is, I'm sorry, what is the KPIs? I have no
Thank you
clue
for
what that is.
asking.
They're key performance indicators.
Okay.
So we use those with our overarching strategic plan, and then oftentimes when we have departmental plans or the committee's talking about the development of a plan just for the committee, there could be the possibility of those for that as well.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you for asking
Thanks
that.
for asking.
Yeah.
I tell staff, acronym alert.
Yeah.
So just did it,
Yeah,
so thank
so
you.
that was a good reminder.
Any questions from council members on those KPIs?
So if you get them at the end of the quarter, those are coming from the departments. Mark, do they have time to get that into our budget document for that next workshop?
We won't necessarily do the quarterly reports. We'll probably have, because this is the first year, it'll be identified but not necessarily have any active reports on it. That'll come as time goes on. Some of these measures are actually annual measures, so we won't have anything until until actually the fourth quarter. So it'll vary, but for the first year, they'll be identified, and we'll take it from there. But as time goes on, we'll have a history of
Right.
performance, But the first year, you're always gonna have that awkward part where it's silence until we get some actual data to support it.
But they'll be identified and approved by this committee, at least at the part in the budget where we're considering any financial requests, correct?
Well, these are the KPIs that were already approved by this committee, that the
Last-
departments came up with.
Last year?
Yes.
No, well, they weren't
Well,
last year, it was earlier
It was
this year.
earlier this year.
That's what Mike was talking about, that we were a little awkward out of the gate. We didn't
Right.
even get them adopted until this year, so we don't have any history to work on these because they're brand-new measures that we're measuring, so.
But they'll be identified before we have
They'll be-
our final budget.
Yep, they've
Yeah, and-
they've already been identified, already been approved. It's just a matter of the data.
It'll be a little sparse in terms of the data,
The
but.
baseline data, yeah,
Right,
Yeah,
right.
No base, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
okay.
Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, we can move on to agenda item 12, committee member roundtable, share DEI-related activities and events in the area. I'd like to acknowledge that from September 15th through October 15th, it is Hispanic Heritage Month. So we did put a little post on Facebook just acknowledging and honoring our Hispanic community, their contributions, honoring their heritage.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I just provide a point of information on this? So the city will be holding their first ever Dia de los Muertos
Oh.
event, October 29th, at the city museum, at the Oshkosh Museum. I believe that involves a parade and festivities, so
Ooh.
just sharing that.
Awesome. And who would be the contact for that? If
Sarah.
you'd like-
Sarah Phillips, our new
Okay.
museum director.
I don't know, mayor or city manager, if you'd like to talk about our recent meeting with representatives of the Menominee Nation.
He beat us to the punch, but. why don't you-
That was
yeah.
pretty interesting, I
That was
thought,
pretty
and
cool.
it was a good
fascinating.
meeting.
We did. We had a visit from the new tribal leadership from the Menominee Nation, Chairman Ron Korn and Randall Chevalier as the new intergovernmental affairs representative, along with Melissa Cook, who is the previous intergovernmental affairs and now is the tribe's archivist. All came down, and we had an excellent visit, and they shared some information. They also inquired about the status of the Chief Oshkosh plaques, of course, and had an excellent visit at the museum, as well as a little tour at Menominee Park. Some of those folks had never been here before, so it was a great relation building day.
Yes, when did that take place? 'Cause I was
Last
just up-
week.
I was just up there last week too. And I had inquired with their tribal historic preservation officer if he had received any inputs from things, and he had not received any word yet, so this must have been, right after
Just
that.
on Tuesday. It was right on Tuesday.
Tuesday.
It's funny. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, they were very complimentary. They saw a lot of opportunity, especially in Menominee Park. We talked about some of the exhibits that we have, and they picked up on the idea of correlating some of the exhibits and also some of the work at the museum that's being done with some of the identified clans. And so they were very excited, about the work that was taking place in the Menominee Park with our zoo, as well as some of the projects that are planned at the museum. We also toured the People of the Waters exhibit and then discussed maybe the expansion of that exhibit. So I think they were very encouraged by the potential, wouldn't you say, Mark?
Oh, yeah, I think they were very excited. They asked I could certainly give you the update on the statue, which isn't much, but they said, when it's done, we would like to be a part of that dedication ceremony, and we're like, oh, absolutely. But so for some of them, that was their first visit to Menominee Park, so it was, I think they were, I don't think they knew the park named after their tribe, that it is our flagship park. So I think they were really impressed with the expanse of Menominee Park, and we're good on with our upcoming bear and fox exhibit. We have 4 of the 5 clans with animals in the zoo, but I don't know if we're gonna be able to get a moose, but we had a good discussion about that. But they talked about different things that they could work with us on in terms of educating the public on, for example, the clans. And that was really neat. And Anna Canizo, our assistant museum director, had a little display of some artifacts that have been donated to the museum over the years that were actually from Chief Oshkosh. So they were very, appreciative of that. Anna had them laid out and was explaining the history of them, and then a little exchange of history, things that they know that have been handed down through oral history, and then just things that we've picked up at the museum. So it was a good kickoff to developing an ongoing relationship with them, and I was.
Especially with new leadership in the transition, it was really important.
Yeah, but it's actually not, it's not the next phase of the People of the Waters, but our next phase of our history is what's called Growing City. And part of that is some of the relocation of the Menominees from this area, and how hard it was on them. And we wanted to tell the story, and so they're like, oh, we can help with that. And so
Right.
really good
Not only how difficult it was
discussion.
for them, but then a relocation of other tribes here and how that was complex for people of their tribe, and how that interaction evolved. So it was pretty fascinating to listen to their perspectives on all that.
And there was that one area, as we were getting on the elevator, Ron stopped, and he was just, I guess his wife's family was part of a group with something that was mentioned there.
Yeah,
I can't remember all the details. Do you remember?
I think Anna had just a little placard of the clans exhibit that they're going to be working on in the future, and I think the chairman remarked on the color selection for the clans, and how he was very pleased that it was accurate in his mind and how important it was, and so that was it was gratifying to hear him say that. So
It was the first intergovernmental contact between the tribe and the city.
And geographically, it was an interesting discovery too, as we were talking about the Sturgeon Feast powwow. So I was invited to that a few months back and attended, but it turns out that there's a body of water 10 miles west of here that is the origination of the sturgeon in the connection to making it to their stream. Actually, now because of the dam that's in Shawano, the DNR has to physically come and place them. But it was just an interesting geographic connection through the water.
Yeah.
And the sturgeon.
I mean, there was so much we could go on and on, but one other interesting thing that I found interesting too, we discussed our challenges with emerald ash borer in the forests, and they talked about how diverse their forest is, how it really only impacted about 10% of their forest land, and how important environmental forestry is to the Menominees. And it was really, again, it was very interesting. I thought it was a really good meeting.
And opportunities for ongoing education.
Right, and how they could help participate in that education and share a variety of information from their areas of expertise. It was really good.
There you go. You have that intersection of the SAB and the DEI there. Okay. Thank you for sharing all that. Any other comments or activities people want to share?
I think we should do more collaboration with the university, just because we do have a lot of events that do pertain to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Obviously, it's only shared to students on the email list. And if you're not a student at UWO, then you might have to pay for it, but I think just like pushing that information out more to more people would help with the diversity, equity, and inclusion here.
Absolutely. Yes, great suggestion.
This is kind of a piggyback off that, and maybe something that we could do in the future, but SAB does, I think it's every semester, they invite students from a class to present on projects related to sustainability, like how we can make sustainability improvements in Oshkosh. Perhaps we could look at doing something similar with a class from them to come and talk about proposals or projects that how we could improve Oshkosh. It's a great time, and we've taken a lot of suggestions from them and suggested them to the city, so.
Yes, they're the future, right? Great ideas, I bet. All right. Okay, anything else before we move on? Okay. Michelle, do you want to discuss the December meeting conflict?
Yes, so as we are the fourth Monday of the month, our December meeting falls on December 26th, which is a city holiday, and I'm sure many of the members also may have plans during that time frame. So we obviously need to decide if we want to move the meeting, if we want to take December off, or what would be recommended by the committee for that December 26th date.
I suggest we cancel that meeting just to give ourselves and our families that time.
I disagree. I'm sorry. I just think that now that there's some clarity and the ability for us to really start working, that it's possible for us to move it up even if it were a Monday. I don't want to lose a day when we have so many in 1 month, simply because our scheduled day coincides with a holiday or time off for the city. I'd rather have that meeting so that we can use that time.
I did hear from Oshkosh Media that the third Monday of the month would be available, if that was a date we wanted to consider.
I believe that works.
We should make it happen.
So
That's 19.
I'll move to have the December meeting scheduled to December 19th at 5:30.
Discussion, comments, questions? Okay. All those in favor of moving our December meeting to the 19th, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Nay. All right. That's all right.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, that's yeah. Let's get it. Let's do this. All right. Okay. Last agenda item. Other than some outstanding items. So update on Chief Oshkosh statue.
Yeah, we're still awaiting the company to send us a proof of what the plaques are going to look like. We've given them the wording that was approved by this committee and the council, so it's really just a matter of them physically getting in that position, and they're backed up just like a lot of other businesses are. So I wish I had something more solid to give you right now, literally and figuratively. But as soon as we get the draft, the proof. Thanks. As soon as we get the proof, we'll make sure it makes the rounds.
It does go to the tribe first.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we wanted to make sure, and we talked to the tribe
And we
about
shared
that. Thank you.
with them when they met with us.
Yeah, because there's some terms that we want to make sure are accurate, and trust me, I'm not the person for that job. So I think the tribe was very appreciative of that.
Thank you. Update on community event. No updates other than I think given our charge and some of those goals that we want to focus on, I think there can be an incorporation of some of those goals within this event. But other than that, the date's been set to September 9th, or 10th. That's Saturday, that second Saturday of September. Oh, it's 11th?
September 11th?
No, I thought
Is that what you're?
Could have sworn that's the.
Okay.
no, I got September
I have September 9th.
is a Saturday.
September
Yeah,
9th. Okay, so
Saturday.
September 9th, 2023. And the location of Riverside Park. That's all I have for updates.
Did anybody make sure Parks reserves that, just so that, it's unlikely somebody would jump in front of you, I just like to make sure it's taken care of.
I have not personally talked to Parks, but I can check in with them.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense. Are you gonna use Leech?
Riverside?
Or just Riverside, or Riverside and Leech?
Just Riverside at this time.
Okay, okay.
I can email Shelley.
I don't think either's gonna be a problem, but the sooner you book it, then that's one less thing you gotta worry about.
Kathy, not Shelley. I was thinking Kathy Snell.
Kathy, yes.
Yes, I'll email Kathy. Okay. And then review future items on council agenda.
Right.
So,
And this was one of the things that we started doing a couple of months ago, just to kind of look at things that you guys are going to be talking about in the future. So on their future agenda, in this last meeting, there's virtual meetings on October 11th, a joint meeting of OSAD Board and City of Oshkosh Common Council on October 27th. And of course, budget workshops, October 17th and 18th.
If you guys want to come and sit in a dentist chair all day, feel free to join us.
At the budget?
Yeah, they're from 8:30, no, 8 until 4. So 2 days. And if you can't attend in person, they are televised.
That'll cure your insomnia.
Just out of curiosity too, then, Michelle, just, would DEI be getting a copy of our budget? Do any of the committees get copies of the budget besides the CIP?
Nobody's ever asked me for one,
No,
but
but it'll be posted online.
right.
Okay. Any other future agenda items? Okay. Again, thank you to council, thank you to our DEI members, thank you city staff for being here tonight. If there are no further questions, comments, can I get a motion to adjourn, please? Okay, all those in favor of adjourning? Aye. Thank you, everyone.